Good morning, and welcome to this online service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington. My name is Lila Herndon-Vizard, and I serve on UUCA's Board of Trustees. I'm very happy to be with you all today. Autumn is my favorite season. I love the changing colors, the changing temperatures, new schedules, new experiences, not to mention the upcoming installation of our new minister. As we gather today, we are taking time to think about the changes and opportunities opening up to our faith community. As Barack Obama said, change will not come if we wait for some other person or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. So let us seek together. Ours is a community of many genders and sexualities, a community of diverse cultural and racial and class backgrounds, a community of varied abilities and gifts. Some here find inspiration in great books, some in the great outdoors, and others still in great conversations. Whoever you may be, we welcome you to bring your whole self into this community. Feel free to use the chat to greet one another and share your likes and loves throughout the service. And I hope that you will join us too for our virtual happy hour right after the service. So take a deep breath as we come together as a community in worship.
A poem by Audre Lorde, a self-described Black, lesbian, mother, warrior, poet, activist. This is Litany for Survival. For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone, for those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways coming and going, in the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward at once before and after, seeking a now that can breed futures like bread in our children's mouths, so their dreams will not reflect the death of ours. For those of us who were imprinted with fear like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk, for by this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hoped to silence us. For all of us, this instant and this triumph, we were never meant to survive. And when the sun rises, we are afraid it might not remain. When the sun sets, we are afraid it might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive. Let us worship together. I invite you to join us in lighting our chalice. We gather together as a community of memory and hope to celebrate life and its infinite possibilities for love. We light this chalice as a symbol of the light within every human heart. May our individual sparks meet and merge, bringing both light and warmth to the world.
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, to this we give, together we share, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. Together we share, and from this we live.
Hello, welcome to A Time for All Ages. I am Reverend Walter, and I want to tell you all a story about something that happened to me in grade school many years ago. I want to tell you about a friend of mine. His name was Michael Manch. We were probably all around about, I want to say, 3rd grade. And we were all having lunch at the lunch table. And Michael comes in and he's got this sandwich. And everybody is looking at Michael. Because, we've all got our standard sandwiches. I was a big fan of the bologna and ketchup. We had a couple ham and cheese and mayonnaise. Of course, your standard peanut butter and jelly. But what Michael had was different. Michael had a peanut butter and pickle sandwich. Now, we all looked at Michael, and being good friends, we decided to tease him a little bit. Peanut butter and pickle sandwich? Michael, are you sure? That does not sound like a really good idea. And we all said how weird that was, how crazy it was. Now, Michael wasn't necessarily one of the coolest kids in school. He was cool enough. And Michael said to us, well, I like it. You don't have to like it. I'm going to eat it. And he went about his business. We kind of let it go. Only we didn't. Next couple of days, we all kind of gave Michael the what for his peanut butter and pickle sandwich. And then finally, one day, one of the coolest kids at the table, his name is David Erickson. David decided, hey Michael, give me a bite. I want to try that peanut butter and pickle sandwich. And all of us were like, no way. No way is he going to eat a bite of that sandwich. And we were fully expecting David to maybe chicken out in the last minute. More than likely, he was going to take a great big bite of that sandwich and do what most of us would do. Ew! Peanut butter and pickle. It's as gross as I imagined. It's worse than I imagined. Oh my God. Why? Why, Michael? Why would you subject us to witnessing this horror each and every lunchtime? And he took a bite. And he stopped. And he kind of made a face. But it wasn't a face. It was a face. And he had a bite. And he was like, you know what, Michael? This is pretty good. And the next day, David brought in a peanut butter and pickle sandwich. And when he brought in his peanut butter and pickle sandwich, a couple of kids tried to bite his, and Michael's, because Michael had one. And they decided it wasn't so bad. And then the next day, there were about 3 or 4 peanut butter or pickle sandwiches at the lunch table. Now, there's a lot of lessons to be learned here. But I think the biggest thing is, when we see something different and unusual and something we're not used to, our first instinct is to just drop it. Ugh. It could be that way when we see things that we don't like for the first time. I don't know how many of you remember the first time you tried hummus or heard of hummus. I'm like, cream chickpeas, ugh. After a while, pretty good. Sometimes these new and different things are scary because we don't know anything about them. But what we learn about what's new and scary is that it can be a lot better than we ever thought. So, you don't have to try a peanut butter pickle sandwich. Well, I'm going to tell you this. It's better than you would thought. And when you're dealing with new things and unexpected things, instead of maybe turning up your nose to them, and instead of maybe saying that's too scary to deal with, or that's gross even though I don't have the personal experience, sometimes it's better to just go in, take a bite, see what happens.
UUCA has long been known as an activist church. We have many groups here that work on our behalf to bring about justice and peace, both in our community and around the world. One of the many things I learned by attending the Service Never Sleeps allyship workshops given here at UUCA was to be an active ally and a co-disruptor, to keep pushing yourself even when you are afraid, tired, and in doubt. In his book, Why We Can't Wait, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. preaches that, quote, time itself is neutral. It can either be used destructively or constructively. More and more I feel that the people of ill will have used time more effectively than have the people of goodwill. We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. Human progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts of men willing to work to be co-workers with God. And without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the forces of social stagnation. We must use time creatively, in the knowledge that the time is always ripe to do right." End quote. One practice of this church has been to support our social justice partners financially, which is indeed very helpful. Due to the pandemic, the sharing of this weekly collection is temporarily suspended. However, there are many ways that we can give back to our church, our community, and our social justice partners. These organizations would definitely benefit from more volunteers and time spent supporting their missions. So if you are looking for an action, or you know you would like to push yourself in some area of social justice work, then I encourage you to visit the church website and reach out to these groups and get involved. When publishing the report, Widening the Circle of Concern, the UUCA Commission on Institutional Change states, "Our work concludes that Unitarian Universalists continue to repel many of the people who would otherwise provide the resources to fuel our continued growth. And the work of becoming more equitable, inclusive, and diverse within our congregations is justice work. If we cannot do this well, we cannot be effective as justice partners." So, what is the best way we can show up right now to be effective social justice partners? If you would like to contribute directly to UUCA, there are many ways we can give. First, you can always mail or drop off a check payable to UUCA with the word offering in the memo line. Second, you can give online at the church website, uucava.org. Click on the donate button on the top of the page. Finally, you can donate using the mobile app, Give Plus. Enter the zip code 22204 and choose our church, UUCA, and follow the prompt to give now. Let's live into the words of Congressman John Lewis and get into some good trouble, and be moved by his charge that patience is a dirty word. However you can show up in this moment will make a difference. Your time and your gifts are very appreciated. Our offertory prayer reminds us, let us be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for those who share their gifts with us, for we are enriched by their giving. Let us be grateful even for our needs, so we may learn from the generosity of others. So we commit this offering, and so we commit ourselves.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers daughters of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one.
Thank you, Kristen, for inviting us to give of our resources, just as we give of our connection to each other. I invite you now to join in a spirit of prayer or meditation. Take a breath with me first. Spirit of life and love, God of many names, these weeks have been hard. Our hearts are worried or broken. We are anxious and waiting. Perhaps we hold in our hearts those who struggle. Perhaps we hold in our hearts joy and love. Spirit of life and love, be with us through all of that. Be with us through all that is. Help us to remember that through the joy and through the struggle, we have too the Spirit of love. We have too our connection to each other. Friends, if there is a joy or a sorrow you would like to share with your congregation, I invite you to write it into the chat now, to send it to UUCA pastoralcare@gmail.com, to reach out to me or Reverend Walter or Diane or Laura and let us know, so that we may hold you in our care, so that we may hold each other in the care of community and in the movement of love that is the Spirit of life. Breathe together, my friends. The Spirit of life and love is with you already.
We are on a journey toward redemption. We have lived a year filled with lamentation, with the strength of generations, the failures of the everyday, and the deep down gritty messiness that is the promise of our salvation. There is inherent goodness that exists between and among us. I want to honor the weary, ragged miracle that is our living tradition. The Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt at the Service of the Living Tradition in 2018. Those words speak to me of hope, of exhaustion, of loss, of grief, and of commitment and possibility, all wrapped up in one. And so they feel like a good way to begin our conversation this morning about widening the circle of concern, which is the report just out this past February from the Unitarian Universalist Association's Commission on Institutional Change. The commission was created by the UUA nationally to look at elements of racism and white supremacy in our denomination, and really to look at it through our movement. So institutionally in our denomination, institutionally in our congregations, how does it show up and how do we move forward? Where do we go from here? There were a number of national luminaries, incredible people like Reverend Dr. Betancourt, like Dr. Elias Ortega, who serves as president of Meadville Lombard Theological School, who came together to create this, to be part of the commission, to create this work, and then to bring in other voices as they went forward. And so they've created this report, which is for all of us. You can actually find every piece of this report on the UUA's website, both in written form that you can read online or download, and also in auditory form, so you can click a link and hear it read aloud. And so I want to really encourage every UUCA member and friend to take a look at that. And because the report was intended not just as something to be read or looked at once and then kind of ignored, but really as something to be engaged with, to spur action, I wanted to have not a sermon about it, but rather a conversation about it. And so I'm so pleased that Reverend Walter and Laura are joining me this morning, and that we can talk a little bit about what we find exciting in widening the circle of concern, and where we see kind of an impulse toward action for UUCA. So thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. So I wanted to start, I have some questions prepared. We've worked on this a little bit, and then we also really just wanted to have kind of a conversation that you all could watch. So little half prepared and half extemporaneous for you this morning. I wanted to start though with a question for Laura. The Widening the Circle of Concern report really begins by talking about the practice of decentering whiteness. And I wondered if you could, first, that's a kind of a term of art in some ways, I think. People might not have been familiar with that phrase before. And I wonder if you could talk about what that means, what it means in this context, just share a little bit about that framework.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they did a really beautiful job of framing this idea of centering, and it kind of all ripples out from this idea of centering that they hold at the core of their work. So it's really beautiful. I think it is really based out of the idea that white supremacy culture is the water that we're swimming in, that particularly as white folks, we are unable to see the marginalization and oppression that is occurring in our society, and specific to this report, occurring within our denomination and within our congregations. And so there are patterns that get perpetuated that white folks, who are most often people who are in positions of power, are unable to see. And so those continue to get perpetuated and continue because we aren't aware of them. So by centering the voices of people of color, centering the perspectives of people of color, I kind of think of it as like shifting the lens so that we have a new point of focus, and their experience is what is in the middle, and what is held as the center, what is held as the most important point that we are working out from. I think it gives us a richer perspective, and it shifts the priorities that we have, shifts who we're listening to and how we hear them. I was thinking about your sermon from last Sunday about heart listening, and the way that's really a huge piece of what this does is listening to different people with a heart listening that maybe hasn't been used previously. I think, some people might also kind of ask, well, why did the report center voices of people of color, and shouldn't we listen to everybody? So I think it's important to remember that those who are in the majority, people who are white, our voices have been heard for a long time, and we kind of don't have any difficulty hearing those voices. And so when we're able to shift and hear new people and new voices and realize that the way we've always done it has caused harm, then we're able to kind of live into new ways of being that I think is really hopeful. I found the report to be very hopeful.
Yeah, I did too. And I think I want to, for folks who haven't yet engaged with the report, just logistically, one of the ways that the voices of people of color were really centered were there were a number of kind of data collection points over the course of a couple of years as the Commission on Institutional Change did its work. So they solicited stories from people of color. They had kind of a symposium time for people of color to come together and share in different ways those stories. So there were a lot of opportunities for that. I want to hold one of the more heartbreaking points for me was that when they started their work, it was actually very difficult to get those stories because so many people of color in our movement felt as though they had told their story and they hadn't been believed, or they had maybe been told they were believed, but then nothing changed, that folks were originally resistant. And so I'm really appreciative of the way the COIC continued their work to try to pull in those stories as much as possible and to create a container both of safety and also with some real hope for action. And so I want to note, here we are, we're three people who identify as white having this conversation. We're talking about the importance of centering voices of color. There are voices of color within Unitarian Universalism, within UUCA. And we, as part of the clergy team at UUCA, do all identify as white. So, Walter, do you think it's weird that we're three white people talking about this? Like, why are we talking about it? Maybe we should just step aside totally, right? Maybe, how would you respond to that kind of question?
Well, I mean, we definitely want to lift up voices of color, but one of the things that was brought up to me when I was working in Richmond during the whole Black Lives Matter initial starting movement is one of the women in the congregation was a Black woman, and she was just tired of it all. She was just exhausted, and she's like, you all realize racism isn't our problem to fix, it's yours. Mm-hmm. You realize that, right? And that's what needs to happen is if you, another good friend of mine, the Reverend Sherman Logan, says, Black people we know our lives matter. It's the white people who need to recognize this. And it's always been my duty that this work of centering those voices of color, we're the ones who have been pushing the margins aside to decenter. And so it's the work of people who are white, who identify as white, to change our behavior and to recognize the water that we're swimming in order to fix this problem. This is something that we've established for 400 plus years in this country. And so when we lift up the idea of that seventh principle, right? One of the things I loved in this report is it talked about the articulating your UU faith from Barbara Wells Tenhope, and talked about the first and seventh principles as being pillar principles, right? And that seventh one, which is interconnectedness, our behavior not only can weigh people down by decentering them, but by centering them, it lifts us up in the process, and it liberates us as well. By liberating those who have been the most oppressed, we liberate ourselves from the systems of oppressions that we've created and the damage that we've done to us. So this is, in my opinion, so much the work of people who identify as white to lift up those voices that have been pushed aside.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say that it's also the responsibility of any institutional leader in a Unitarian Universalist congregation, in the denomination, right? So all of us need to be working on it. And then absolutely, Walter, I think that idea of, I would call it collective liberation, right? You know, that my impulse as a white person to do work around anti-racism and to dismantle systems of oppression is not so that I'm doing that work for people of color to be liberated. I'm doing that work because, right, Fannie Lou Hamer says none of us are free till all of us are free, right? Like, I'm doing that work because we collectively are stuck. Amen. And there's a piece of the work that is and has to be mine as a white person. And so time to get going. So I think that's a great shift actually to some of the action pieces in the Widening the Circle of Concern report, because as I said, one of the great things is that it's really clear, you know, right? Like page 42, take these 3 actions. And I've already started to see how I was chatting with the UUCA nominating committee the other day, talking about some of their hopes for developing new leadership at UUCA, and you know, they're thinking about new leadership broadly within the congregation. How can we get folks who haven't been in leadership before to take part? Well, there's a section in the Widening the Circle of Concern report titled Nominating Committees as Agents of Change. So I was able to link to that and say, take a look. This, you know, there's probably some stuff in here that you would be able to learn from, incorporate. So really all through kind of every aspect of denominational and congregational life, I think you've got some really great actions there. So Laura, I want to start thinking, as we're thinking about how UUCA itself may engage with this report, I want to start with you, because I know that you're going to be leading kind of a monthly study group on the report. And so I'm wondering if you can say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm hopeful that that'll be a time where in community we can kind of dive deep and be able to talk about what this means for us at UUCA, what it means for us as individuals, and what it means for our denomination. So I'm hopeful lots of people will want to come and join us. They just published a study guide, which I think will be very helpful, and I'm grateful I don't also have to create that. So thank you to all the powers that be creating that. But that'll be the second Thursday of the month at 7:00, starting on November 12th, and we'll go for 6 sessions. There's so much to discuss in this report, so I'm excited.
That's great. Laura, do they have to go to all 6 sessions?
I think folks can drop in.
If they can't make all 6, though I imagine that it will feel richest the more you go to, right? Like that's like anything, the more you need. But
I experienced the report as kind of cumulative of like, I'm glad I started in the beginning and, you know, had the grounding of the theology that then pulled me through the rest of the report. So I do think it would be helpful to attend all of them, or as many as you can, or at least maybe start at the beginning.
Right. Or read a little bit, right? If you come in the middle to the study group, you know, you can engage with it online and then kind of come in. That's great. Exactly. That's great. Reverend Walter, what do you see, where do you see it popping up, either already or as you imagine working with social justice ministries team and with some of the social justice teams at UUCA over the course of, the next months and year?
Well, one of the things that I've really loved is knowing that a lot of people who've been on the Eighth Principle Task Force, after we passed the Eighth Principle, they're really concerned about how are we implementing this throughout our congregation. And I love the fact that they really want to focus on our institutions, our personal institutions first. And the report really does a good job of lifting that up, how we need to examine some of the things that we're doing here. And what I love is in the Living Our Values in the World section of the report. See, I didn't get the nice copy yet. I had to print mine offline. But it talks about taking things on a personal level, an interpersonal level, an institutional level, and a cultural level. And I love that circular systems thinking about that because I see us doing that work in our congregation with a lot of the work we do around Living to Pledge and the work we've done with in our Christian education. And we're taking that out to our own institutions. But the thing that I really loved is there are some things here that really talk about grounding everything in our faith. And that's something that I've tried to work with the social justice ministries team on. And there's this one quote here. Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color within Unitarian Universalism repeatedly point out that too often our justice work is not grounded in our faith and our theological mandates. A better articulation of this could help make the connection between justice making and anti-oppression work clear. Without this, too often work for justice has a charitable bent that can be patronizing and demeaning. I love the idea that our faith needs to lift us up in this, to be the core about it. So it's not just us being saviors to help people in need, but that it's part of our faith that we want to be interconnected and joined and to liberate ourselves and others.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so theologically grounded, and I think grounded in the concepts of collective liberation and of covenant, like all through the report, right? You see those really as foundational to Unitarian Universalism and to Unitarian Universalism's, I would say, kind of survival and relevance as we move into the future as well. I think one of the other things I really took away that I feel like any white Unitarian Universalist can use this report, can use, you mentioned Centering, which is a book of essays written by Unitarian Universalist religious professionals, mostly ministers, some religious educators of color. And then there's a great book called Unitarian Universalists of Color, and that's essays written by lay leaders who are UUs, who identify as people of color. I think there are these resources for those of us who identify as white to really be able to understand more fully the lived experience of BIPOC, of Black, Indigenous, people of color in our congregations. And I'm not usually that much of a pulpit thumper, but I would say there's no excuse at this point for any white UU not to know or be able to learn about that experience more fully. And I think for me, I'm a third generation UU. I love this faith. It's been a welcoming and beautiful home for me. It's painful to see the ways in which that same home has been harmful to colleagues and friends who are people of color. And it's my job to look at those stories as a white person and to understand them more fully, and then to work together to change the system. So that's sort of the personal charge that I would really give to anyone who identifies as white. I think for folks at UUCA who identify as BIPOC, who identify as people of color, I do want to make sure that you know that there are some great resources regionally and nationally to support UUs of color. And that also really came out in the report for me, the importance of people of color in UU congregations who sometimes find themselves, exhausted from the microaggressions, pushed into lay leadership too quickly but not supported, just lonely in their cultural experience within the congregation. That there are some fantastic national and regional gatherings. There's Diverse Radical UU Multicultural Ministries, Drum, Blue, which is Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism. Our region does, I think it's a weekly call for people of color in UU congregations in the region. So this, like, any people of color at UUCA who are looking for those kinds of connections, please let me know. I'm happy to personally connect you with the leaders of those groups and get you connected and get you connected to each other if you'd like, or however I can be of support to that. I just want to make sure that that message gets across, because there are resources out there. And as I think we saw again and again in the report, they can be vital for Unitarian Universalist people of color who are striving to stay, I mean, I'll just be honest, striving to stay in the movement when it's really painful. So I wanted to talk just a little bit as well about how the UUA is going to engage with this report, because we've been kind of concentrating on what will it mean, what can it mean for congregations, what can it mean for individual Unitarian Universalists. And there's a lot in the report that is actually action for the denomination to take. Some of you all watching, I know Reverend Walter and Laura, you both know that I serve on the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, and we met last week, 2 weeks ago. One of the actions is asking the MFC to look at kind of widening the pathway toward ministry. You know, seminary is, as both of you and I know, enormously expensive. It means that it's often just a little enormously expensive. Yeah, it's like the cost of med school, someone said, was kind of comparing it to the cost of med school. The salaries are not generally similar to doctor salaries right after med school. So sort of really widening that path, making it potentially easier for transfers from other denominations, you know, many options for what that might look like. And everything is at a very beginning stage. But I can say already the MFC is starting to look at that, right? You know, we've gotten that charge from the COIC, and we take it as a charge, you know, not an option, that's going to be part of our work as a national committee to look at that recommendation. And I think that's happening all through the UUA as different, whether they're committees or parts of the denomination's staff groups, where folks are looking at those actions and already moving forward. I know that one of the actions calls for sort of the creation or really the collation, the curating of BIPOC rituals and theology. And I know that's already in the works. There's a book stuff's being collected now. It'll be edited and out in the next year, curating rituals, healing, theological essays, etc., created by Black, Indigenous, people of color, Unitarian Universalists. So it's exciting to me to see that already beginning throughout the movement. Anything either of you want to add for what else felt juicy in there, or hopeful or convicting, speaking as a white person, or what else do you hope to really see flourish?
I think kind of going off of what you were saying before, Amanda, I think I really appreciated that the report gave me as a white person an opportunity to hear these stories and absorb everything that was, all the truths that were being told in this work. And it let me start to kind of get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. That I was able to sit with the fact that these truths are really uncomfortable and that I haven't seen them, and that I could possibly have gone on without seeing them. But I can do that like at my house and sort through my reaction there, so that I'm not sorting through my reaction or responding in weird ways when I'm having a conversation with a colleague, or when I'm having a conversation where somebody's telling me those truths and I haven't sorted through that. Mm-hmm. So I appreciated the honesty and the work and the truth telling of the report. Really, it's beautiful.
Well, and the other thing is there's an element of hope, isn't there? I mean, yeah, this is hard for us to hear, but ain't nothing better when you've heard bad news and feel like there's an unsolvable problem and then to be given some step-by-step solutions to help make you move forward, right? I love the fact that it's an honest report, and it can be hard to hear, but there's an element of hope because our faith grounds us to be better. Our covenantal faith calls us to love each other and to lift each other up and to listen to each other. And so there's an element of hope that grounded in our faith, we can make this world a better place by starting with ourselves. And it can be hard to hear on the surface, but once you really dig into it deep, this is a document of hope. One of the things I loved about the emergent strategy book is the science fiction angle of it in Star Trek, how we have this hope for what a better future could look like. And this is our hope for a better future. And so I'm excited that we're having these messy conversations, and I'm excited that we're wrestling with these big issues, because you can't clean up your bookshelves till you take all your books off the shelves and then reorganize them. We're making a mess, but we're gonna create something beautiful.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for being part of this conversation. And again, I really do want to encourage everyone at UUCA to take a look, to read, to listen. I particularly encourage white folks at UUCA to join us as white people in engaging with this work, the three of us. And again, POC folks at UUCA, if we can help connect you with resources, please let us know. We would love to. And everybody.
November 12th.
What's that? Yes, November 12th. The COIC study group is starting on November 12th. And so everybody at UUCA, I think, this is our work together, and it had better be our work together if we want to be together, right? Like that's sort of the bottom line for me is this is a huge gift to our faith, to our movement, to trust each other with these stories, and to trust. Part of that trust is that the movement as a whole, all of us who carry power and privilege, all of us who have not historically carried power and privilege, that we do the work to change the movement, so that ultimately, when I think about decentering and centering voices of color, I love the image from the title of widening the circle of concern. Ultimately, you want to create a center that's big enough to hold all. We're not there yet, but that's what we long for. That's what we yearn for, is that circle in which all of us are included. draw the circle wide, we sing. May you find that every circle you are in gets wider and wider. May you reach your hands out to form the widest circle you can imagine. May we together be the holders of the beautiful circle of life. May it be so. Amen.
I need you, you need me. We're all a part of God's body. Stand with me, agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It is God's will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive.
I need you, and you need me. We're all a part of God's body. Stand with me, agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It is God's will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive.
I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive.
I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. I pray for you, you pray for me. I love you, I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you, I need you to survive. I pray for you, you pray for supply.
You are